Can you hear me? Are we live? Are we live? Are we live? Can you hear me? Are we live? Yes, I'm here. Hello, hello, hello. Testing 1, 2. Somebody tell me if you can hear me okay. I am so paranoid about losing my audio after last week's fiasco. So I'm waiting for someone to text and go, Mike, we hear you fine, 5 by 5. Or maybe my buddy Scott Jernigan's going to help me. And nobody's yet told me that they can hear me. So now I'm about to get paranoid. Everything seems to be jumping really good. Sound works. Say, Andre, how hard was that? Batman, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Scott Jernigan's kind of a little slow on the job these days, so I appreciate you guys covering for him. And you should only get paid as much as he does. Hey. All right. Well, I hope you guys all had a great weekend. I did. I did nothing. It was fabulous. The diet marches on. I am about 1.5 pounds thinner than I was on Friday. I know it's a little aggressive, but I'm feeling good about it. I'm doing squats again after a 15-year hiatus. Not too shabby. Ran about a 1/4 mile. I know it's not much for you runners, but for a big old chubster like me, huffing and puffing along, I ran it. Felt kind of excited about that. So anyway, feeling pretty good about things. I got to eat. Do you guys know what dolmas are? If you're like into Greek food. So I got this gal, my nutritionist actually cooks my meals, so I can't cheat. I literally can only eat what she feeds me. But she made me dolmas, which is a Mediterranean treat. It's rice wrapped in grape leaves. It's delicious. And it came with tzatziki sauce, and I loved it. And I got a few more. I'm going to probably take after this presentation's done. So we'll have dolmas and tzatziki, man. So I'm pretty excited about that. All right, so I did promise last week that this week was going to be 802.11. And man, I spent the entire weekend working on 802.11. I've got plenty of presentations, but to be honest with you, I never like them. I've never done a video I really liked. I've never written a book I really liked. There's always something I can do to make it better. And I've been thinking to myself that, if we're all stuck at home together, why not allow me to take advantage of this time to start developing stuff that might be a little bit more in depth than your average bear would want. Now, I got to keep in mind, if you're going to teach anything in technology, there's 4 reasons to do it. Number 1 reason to do it is it's going to make you a better tech. Number two reason is it's going to help you pass a certification. Number 3 is an interesting one. Number 3 is sometimes you have to teach people stuff that they don't need to learn. Because if you don't teach them that stuff, they're going to feel left out. Or they're going to feel like you've cheated them of something. So I've learned over the years that sometimes I have to teach you about things not because you need it to be a better tech, not because you need it to be a better test taker for a certification, but because if I don't teach you, you're going to get crabby at me. So that's the 3rd reason. And the 4th one, and this is an important one, and I hope the reason you guys hang out with me at all is because I believe in this. And the 4th reason is CySA, because it's cool. Sometimes I just like to learn stuff because it's interesting to me. And there's a lot about 802.11 that might make you a better tech later, especially if you go for a more advanced wireless professional cert. Probably not on the exam at the depth that I like to cover it, but man, is it cool. And so what I did, and I'm going out on a leap of faith here that this will be cool with you guys, that I can take 802.11 a little bit deeper and make people understand things. Now keep in mind, I'm not going nuts here, okay? I could go crazy nuts if I wanted to, and it would still be very interesting to me, although me and probably Vimal and Terrence Tech would be the other ones who probably like this stuff. I know a lot of you guys would too. Oh, wait a minute. Everybody stop everything. Is it her? Is she here? Where? There she is. Elaine Batzer is here. Hi, Elaine. My favorite Yankee person in the whole universe. And Elaine is an instructor and administrator at a wonderful program, and I could never remember the name of the dumb your schools. Elaine, I am so sorry. I've personally been to her school, and it was amazing. What a wonderful program, amazing Cisco house, and always glad to see Elaine here. So just so you guys know, we have a wonderful Cisco instructor in the house. So if you've got any questions you want to direct towards Elaine, feel free to just type them in. I will not be offended at all. Okay, so are you guys comfortable with me? Well, I hope you are, because we're doing it. We're going to do 802.11 in a little bit more depth. I don't think we're going to be able to get it all today. In fact, I guarantee you we're not. I haven't even completed the 802.11ax part because I've done it in this deeper way. 802.11ax is now more complicated, and of course, when I do PowerPoints, I need lots of animation and color, and that's just Mike Meyers and the way he likes to do stuff. So this will certainly spill until tomorrow to some degree, and so write down your questions, or if you want to, send me your questions directly. Here's my contact information right here. I'm Michael M at TotalSim.com or DesWeds at ProtonMail. You can use either one of those addresses. They each work perfectly. Here's my Steam address if you want to do some gaming. I'm not doing a lot of gaming these days. This is my office number. There's nobody in the office right now. If it was really, really important, you can get a hold of me. Odds are good I would probably talk to most any of you guys directly on my cell phone. I just don't want to put my cell phone number up on a public forum. Elaine, did I say dumb? I didn't mean dumb. That was not the words that I meant to come out of my mouth. And then also, when in doubt, DesWeds, that is me. So if you ever need to get a hold of me, DesWeds is the way to do it. Elaine, did I say dumb? I didn't mean dumb to you. I'm sorry. All right, well, Terrence Tech, you're going to get your 802.11 in depth. And Elaine, it's always good, really is a pleasure to have you here. Just thank you so much for showing up. Guys, really, Elaine is a crackerjack Cisco instructor, and is a real benefit to have on. One of these days I'm going to figure out how to get a Zoom meeting on here, and I'm going to get Elaine on here with me remotely. Of course, Elaine, you could come down to Texas. It's going to be, hey Sandy, what's the temperature going to be today? 80 something? Yeah, it's going to be in the 80s and sunny, and we'll ride bikes and maybe have a glass of wine, but if you like that cold, Elaine, hey, the airplanes are flying. I've heard that it's a terrible experience, but you can get on a plane. You think I'm joking, Elaine? I'm serious. Come on down, man. I'll put you up. Anyway, so we do have a couple of questions that came in over the weekend. Surprisingly, very few questions, but one was particularly interesting, and I think the person who asked this question is actually on right now. Mike, do companies that worry about proprietary information use Windows 10? I know a lot of tech businesses run on Linux. Do they? And was curious if they just use Windows Server and run Linux workstations, or if they lock down Windows reporting and use Windows 10. Okay, most larger companies don't even use the same Windows that you and I use. There's a version of Windows called Windows Enterprise. And Windows Enterprise is the only version of Windows I know that allows you, or allows the administrators to lock down, if not all, almost all of the telemetry on Windows 10. Do keep in mind though, guys, we get a little paranoid about that, but this has been checked time and time again. Microsoft does a pretty good job of respecting your choices when it comes to telemetry. Yeah, there is some data that does go out, but you have a lot of control. And it could be better, sure, but you do have a lot of control there. I'm not particularly worried about it. Holy smoke, talk about amazing teachers. Audrey O'Shea is in the house too. Audrey's an instructor up in northern New York. Elaine, she's almost as far north as you are. Heck, she might be further north than you. Anyway, we're really lucky here. We got two amazing instructors on, and Audrey, I'm also going to see if I could get you to do a Zoom meeting with us. It would be fun to have you on board. Audrey's also written competing products to me, but it's all love over here. All love over here. Okay. All right. Let's see if we got some questions here. We're going to be Terrence Tech. Mike, have you considered publishing a resource companion book as a reference? Terrence, I feel that my books are pretty... Oh, Sandy, Ernie Callis says hello.
Hey, Ernie.
She says hello right back at you. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? I feel that all my books are reference books. Guys, you guys got to keep in mind, I am always one, I don't really care. I will go beyond the certification objectives whenever I think it's going to make you rule number one, how to be a better tech. So, Essex North Shore Agriculture Technical School. Thank you, Elaine. I don't know why that doesn't stick in my head. I got it in my phone. No excuse, ma'am. Greg Davis, number 4 is my reason 95% of the time. Because it's cool, man. It is important to be able to just do stuff that's cool. I did a good thing on this presentation I'm about to show you on OFDM. I hope you guys like it. Steve G, question Mike, I have 20 plus years of customer service. Want to transition IT, mainly work from home, remote support, tech support, software support, but as my first sort being a high school dropout, when I first get my A+ or CompTIA IT fundamentals. Man, Steve, 20 years in, I'd almost be tempted to tell you to get the GED, brother. Even 20 years in, I think that would just be able to show that high school sheepskin could be important. The thing, Steve, about choosing between A+ or CompTIA IT fundamentals is really what kind of, imagine you want to be remote tech support. If you're working on systems, you're supporting systems, configuring operating systems, stuff like that, well then A+ is probably the way to go. If you're just going to be helping individual applications, hi, I'm tech support for Joe's application X, then IT fundamentals would probably be a great way to go. Honestly, if you're unsure, take IT fundamentals. It's dirt cheap. It used to be dirt cheap. I hope it's still dirt cheap. And it's an easy, quick score. If you want to just schlep something at the bottom of your resume for a credential, it's a great way to go. Elaine, you have a brother in the Woodlands? Oh, man. Come down. I'll buy you a beer. Actually, that'd be great. Elaine's really a great person and a great program. Elaine, I would probably, if you came down, we would have a discussion about programs. And I would love to see how much other schools could copy from the amazing work you guys are doing. I'd be willing to consider a Zoom, Terrence Tech, I would be willing to consider a Zoom nerd meetup, just as a funsies kind of a thing. I'd probably be drinking alcohol during this meetup. I hope that wouldn't be offensive to anybody, but yeah, I'll do it. Audrey O'Shea, Mike's books are great. Oh, Audrey. Several years, great reference books. Batman 9002, they're a great reference. Having a discussion about Blu-ray discs with friends recently and used the A+ book for into discussion. My man. Greg Davis, you're a professor as well? Oh, but on the health informatics. Still though, Greg, I tell you what, Greg, send me an email directly, please. Let me put my contact information back up. I'd like to hear more about that, especially given the fact that you're an instructor. I understand you're not, right straight into the same thing we're doing, but I would be interested. Thanks. Well, this is crazy. So, Elaine, I got Dave Rush from my office in here. You got a chauffeur. This is great. Patrick Epkins, is that a new name? I think it is. Go for it, man. Get that A+. David Burns. Whoa. Hey, Mike. I went ahead online A+. It was not a good experience after all. Passed system test twice. Ended up waiting 70 minutes. Proctor never showed. Now waiting on Pearson to refund me. David, send me an email. David Pearson. David Burns. Sorry, David Pearson. David Burns, send me an email. Do it today. I want to hear from you. We're combining a lot of information on people who are doing the online experience. You are now the second person I've heard who's had some troubles. So please send me an email. I would like, and I will give you my phone number. We will talk over the phone. I am very curious to hear about your experience. Raven C, is there a site you know where I can pay for the CompTIA where I can do a retake in case I'm so nervous I fail the first time? Yeah, Raven C, everybody does that. When you sign up and you go to a testing center, or you do it online, which some people are doing now, you can do a retake, but you're gonna have to pay for it. Yeah, there's no second try. Remember, the number one reason that people fail CompTIA exams is test anxiety. That is the number one reason. So what I'd recommend you do is use great study materials by somebody named, I don't know, Mike Meyers. How does that sound? And I have great books. I got great videos. But the biggest thing, especially if you're worried about tests, my practice questions. My practice questions even emulate the look and feel of actual CompTIA exams. What I want to do is get your anxiety down as much as possible. So I don't mimic the questions, obviously, because they lock me up and throw away the key, but I do mimic the look and feel of the actual interface, which a lot of people have told me is extremely beneficial, because when you walk up and you see something you've seen before, it's like, oh, I know this. So, but the bottom line is, if you fail, you have to pay again. Yeah, you got to pay again. So it's no fun. But keep in mind, it's not the SAT. I fail 1/3 of all my certification exams. Can you guys hear that cat? I'm cat sitting. I'm cat sitting for Wissa, the NASA girl, who's up hiking somewhere and asked me if I'd watch her cat. I said, yeah. 18-year-old cat. I call it Spewy. So Raven, did that answer your question for you? I hope so. On a serious note, didn't CompTIA, yes, Elaine, they did, a healthcare IT cert, then they discontinued it. They had a bunch of certs that they dumped. They had a help desk cert, A+ help desk. God, I don't even remember them all. I think there were like 7 different, the second exam, there were 7 different ones. It's like 10 years ago. Eduardo Torres, ¿cómo está, amigo? Hey, Mike, I want to build a system which lets me watch my favorite streamers on Twitch and doesn't heat up like my laptop. What specifications would you recommend for it? You want a desktop system? And all you want to do is watch streamers? Geez, dude. I mean, you could go pretty lightweight there, and I'm going to just assume you want a desktop. Man, I would look at some small form factor box. Wouldn't even have a fan in it. You'd still want a decent monitor, but even the small form factor boxes will push minimum of 1080 on HDMI. You're not going to need more than 8 gigs of RAM. I'd probably throw 16 in just because that's what I do. I would put in one little M.2 SSD drive running NVMe. Terabyte would be plenty. And onboard video, again, you're running a web page, dude, so you're not really pushing anything at all there. You could probably get away with the onboard graphics, depends on what small form factor board you get, and find your own little case, put some lights in there, you know what I mean, make it pretty, and then take a picture of it and show it to me. I'd love to see it. Eduardo, I got you, Eduardo. The bottom line, Eduardo, is you're not asking it to do anything. Yeah, Jimmy, there's Meow Mix around here somewhere. I like cats. I just, I like them fried and baked. No, I'm kidding. I've been a cat owner for a long time, but I quit. So, Firkin, I'm glad to hear that you didn't have any issues for the online test. The vast majority of people we've talked to have had no problems whatsoever. It's been smooth as silk. The reason I'm more interested to talk to this gentleman is because this is only the second time that I've heard people had trouble. And the first time someone had trouble, I'm pretty sure they did something stupid and kind of deserved it. This does not sound like them, so we'll find out. Ooh, Andrew Hutz, you gonna take over for me and ask Eduardo, hey man, build the system in the background. I don't care. Peter Hunt, my experience 1001 was nerve-wracking. Yeah, the biggest problem that most everybody have, Peter, is that it's test anxiety. For a lot of people, the A+ is the first real certification they've gone for. So it's not like an old geezer like me who's been taking certs since 19... And so it is. It can be nerve-wracking. But, be cool, man. That's the secret to passing any of these. And that's also when you move outside of CompTIA and move into more advanced certs, that's still going to be the story. PvP boy. I'm PvE, man. I'm not a PvPer. If you had to pick an IT job, would it be in a school or a hospital? Right now, in a school, I wouldn't have to go to work. Although I'm not quite sure how Audrey and Elaine feel about that, both being instructors, but you'd have to ask them. But in general, honestly, if you take the coronavirus out, being an IT person in a hospital, I would think would be fascinating, because pretty much every testing device in a hospital today is basically a PC with something hooked to it. So the amount of experience you'd get, the breadth of knowledge would probably be amazing. Mobility Plus, Terrence Tech. I'd completely forgotten about that one. All right. Cool. Andrew, I got no argument with the Ryzen 3 for a low power system like that. CIDR shorthand notation comes for the A+1001, Jal Sosa. I don't care. I mean, for me, I certainly care about your question, don't get me wrong. But for me, I teach CIDR as an introduction to IPv4. I think the biggest mistake people make with IPv4 is that you start learning it and you become a victim of the dots, as I call it. The 3 dots that are in an IPv4 address, they're not even there. So like a lot of times what I'll do in an instructional thing, and I'll go, okay, here in the United States, if you're going to write a phone number, you type open parenthesis, an area code, close parenthesis, a exchange, 3-digit exchange, then a dash, and then 4 numbers. So when you grab your phone, where do you type in the open parenthesis? Where do you type in the closed parenthesis? And people are like, oh, they're just placeholders there to help people. And I'm like, exactly right. Those dots are just placeholders. And as an instructor, if I can get that into somebody's brain early on, the idea of moving outside of a WAC 24 or even a WAC 16 subnet gets a lot easier, as long as you know there are no dots. There are no dots. Man, if you've taken a Net Plus from me, you have definitely... Oh, shoot. Sorry. So anyway, first of all, for especially those of you who are new, just because you are kind enough to show up today, you get, well, everybody who's listening gets a 50% discount on the A+, Net Plus, and Security Plus test bank. I'm going to let Scott Jernigan update that, and he'll tell us exactly. It's a 50% off this time. And yeah, 50% off is a great deal, guys. I mean, come on. They're the best practice questions in the country, and you get 50% off. I mean, that's ridiculous. You should buy them for presents. Audrey O'Shea, Arduino fan. I'm a Raspberry Pi person, Audrey. Yeah, Eduardo, sorry, man. Yo hablo español para gringos solamente. You guys are all talking about that stuff. My problem is I have a bunch of Raspberry Pis laying around. I just never use them. Dave Rush is a big fan of Raspberry Pis and has certainly turned me on to lots of cool things to do with them, and it's got to get that round to it, you know what I mean? Hey guys, I need to warn you right now, Audrey O'Shea is a crackerjack technician, not just PCs. She knows how to solder and is actually very comfortable. And if she said Arduinos are cool, you should listen to her. Okay, Vimal, sorry. Let's do 802.11. Absolutely right.
Here's what I...
Sorry. Let me make sure there's no fires burning here. Okay, ready for 802.11? Let's get started. All right, here we go. So guys, we're going to start at the very beginning of 802.11, And wait a minute, we got a great incoming question from Double Talk. Hi Mike, quick question. Since NAT is primarily used to combat the limitations on the number of IPv4 IP addresses available, will IPv6 render NAT redundant? Yes. And the sooner the better. Well, Mike, if we don't have NAT, then that means all of our internal IP addresses will be public and will be exposed to the internet. No, they're not. You're going to use proper firewalling to make sure that doesn't happen. In fact, most of the IPv6 capable routers that are out there right now come with default firewalling that protects internal networks. So there's almost nothing for you to do. IPv6 is very cool, and the sooner IPv6 takes over, the happier I'm going to be. All right. Beginning broadcast now. All right, guys, let's talk about 802.11. Before I get started, I want to let you guys know something. I'm kind of trusting the good relationship that I have with you guys to give me an opportunity to experiment. This is an Apollo 13 kind of presentation. I've decided I want to go deeper. There can be both technical flaws as well as presentation flaws, which I apologize about ahead of time, but in return, you guys get to see the cutting edge brain of me as a trainer and trying to come up with the best way to teach this kind of stuff. So I'm gambling that this is okay. We had a little problem last week where I screwed up on a TIA 568 wiring code, and boy, did I get a lot of emails over the weekend over that. The vast majority were very friendly. A lot of people poked fun, which is fair, and one person got a nasty email back. But everybody else were cool. All right, back to 80. So we all understand. All right, here we go. All right, so 802.11, basically, it's an IEEE 802.11 standard for radio frequency transmission over ISM, industrial, scientific, and medical bands. It's using radios instead of copper or fiber optics to talk between computers. 802.11 started in 1997, but it has been updated continuously. So you have these flavors or subversions, or nobody has a perfect name for it, but they're like 802.11a or G or N or AX or all kinds of different numberings in there, okay? So the question is, all right, that sounds good, Mike, but where do we start? So what we're going to do is I'm going to cover a few different topics, which we'll all put together as 802.11. First of all, I want to make sure you guys know what the ISM radio frequency bands are. Secondly, I want to talk about 802.11 and its operation modes. These operation modes work on the earliest versions of 802.11 and the latest. So it doesn't matter what version you have, they all work the same. We're going to take a look at an 802.11 frame. I hope that you guys have some concept about, for example, like an Ethernet frame. I thought it might be interesting to take a, I'm not going to say a 10,000, but maybe a 2,000 foot overview on 802.11 frames. And then we're going to look at carrier sense multiple access collision avoidance, or how wireless networks don't stomp all over each other. All right, let's go ahead and get started with ISM bands. So, ISM bands are areas in the radio frequency spectrum that are set aside for low power devices. So, there's lots and lots of ISM bands out there, but the 802.11 only cares about two. So, there's the 2.4 to the 2.4835 gigahertz and the 5.7 to 5.875 gigahertz. No. You're not going to be tested on exactly what are the size of the ISM bands on a CompTIA exam. It will expect you to know what ISM is. It doesn't care that you know it stands for industrial, scientific, and medical, yet you know that it's a unlicensed band. You don't need a license, and it has to be low power devices. We'll talk about that more in a second too. So you can have 1 watt of maximum transmitter power, and then you can screw an antenna on there that adds up to a total of 4 watts of power. Now there's lots of regional restrictions, and just a couple of weeks ago, the a new band called the 6 gigahertz band is opened by the Federal Communication Commission, FCC, and it is in the 5.925 to 7.125 gigahertz. So they're actually adding a third big band for 802.11, which is going to change things. One of the problems we're running into with 802.11 is that the 2.4 gigahertz band is completely clogged. I mean, unless you live like, you know, like where Audrey O'Shea lives in a nice, pretty little, pristine, lovely town in upstate New York, here in the middle of Houston, don't even bother with 2.4. It's terrible. The 5 gigahertz band is quickly filling, and so we need this extra band. There's not a lot of details yet. I haven't dug that deep, but the 6 gigahertz band is out. So probably the next time I'm teaching a new Net Plus in a year and a half or 2 years from now, I'll be adding a third ISM band. But for now, it just got announced. The second big thing is what we call the operation modes. First of all, you have what's called an infrastructure mode. An infrastructure mode includes what's called a wireless access point, or a WAP, and all this thing is an 802.11 to Ethernet bridge. So if you've got a WAP, you're going to have a little box with some radios in it, transmit and receive radios, and then there's going to be an RJ45 connector, because that is what a WAP is. It bridges Ethernet to 802.11 networks. And it's commonly configured via HTTP. I can actually show you this if you'd like. So if you take a look here, I have logged into a router. Now it uses some of its own little bit of DNS, but the router's address is 192.168.55.1. And I'd logged in previously, so it logged me right back in. So this is a pretty common way that we configure wireless access points. This is more than a wireless, this is also a full-blown router, but you get the idea. You don't want to see me, you want to see the presentation. There we go. Show them, Mike. I just did, Mike. I knew that was in there. So ad hoc mode is a very different animal. With ad hoc mode, there are no WAPs allowed. So you basically have individual devices, and one person sets up the wireless network, and the other ones then connect to him through something called an SSID, which we'll talk about shortly. So let's talk about infrastructure mode. With an infrastructure mode, the cornerstone of everything is called the service set identifier, or the SSID. That's the thing when you're logging on and you look on your Windows machine or on your phone and it shows you all the wireless networks. What you're looking at is a list of SSIDs. SSIDs are a 32-character maximum. They are case sensitive, and special characters are allowed, but a little bit risky. This is where you run into these situations where the standard allows stuff, but in actual application, you probably don't want to. So I've seen plenty of SSIDs, I'll bet you guys have too, that have exclamation points in them, and dots and dashes and stuff like that, but it's risky. For example, putting in a pipe command has been proven to wreak havoc on certain wireless access points. So try to keep your SSID simple. For example, mine is Robot Overlords, so always easy to find a Mike Meyers SSID. Now, if you take one WAP and you apply one SSID to it, you have created a basic service set identifier, or a BSSID. If you're running an ad hoc mode, you create what's known as an independent service set identifier. Some people call it IBSS. So a lot of people, they're like, oh, wait a minute, Mike, with this ad hoc mode, I don't have a WAP, right? So that means, let's say I got 5 Windows 10 systems. How do I turn it on? Well, you have to pick one machine who's going to be the boss. And that machine, you go in, it has to be done through a command prompt in Windows 10. I'm not aware of a way to do it other than that. And using like netsh command or net commands, you have to go through, not netsh commands, to configure it. You create an SSID and then everybody can connect to you and there's no WAP. So how do we get on the internet? Well, you don't usually. I guess you can set up internet connection sharing if you wanted to do that on one of the machines to share an internet connection. But if you're going to that extreme, you might as well just get a WAP. All right. The other thing is that most WAPs support multiple SSIDs. This gives us some real big benefits. Like I've got a WAP, and so I'm working for a certain federal or U.S. federal organization that has 3 letters and guns. We'll leave it at that. And so they have a bunch of WAPs that are all over the place, but they also have like defense attorneys who are coming in to defend their clients against the evil government, right? So they, by law, have to provide evidence and things like that. But they don't want defense attorneys on their internal network. So what they do is they create like a guest SSID. And the guest SSID, it can be programmed, for example, to plug into a different VLAN. And so you can put all kinds of protections in there. But you don't have to buy more WAPs. You can use the same WAP and just add more SSIDs. So when you talk about, in fact, when you talk about 802.11 in general, there's a big difference between enterprise level equipment that's running schools and large organizations and stuff like that, and the SOHO world, which is small offices and homes. There's a huge difference in terms of the cost, in terms of the overall quality, in terms of configuration methodology, in terms of the granularity of configuration. So when I'm teaching you 802.11, I know that you're eventually going to probably be hitting some enterprise level stuff. So a lot of the discussions I have includes things that might be enterprisey, that even those of you who have probably worked on home routers may not have really seen as a configuration option or something like that. And that's something you really need to keep in mind when you're learning about 802.11, is that the gulf between SOHO type equipment and enterprise equipment is vast, vast. So here's an example. I just stole this off a Cisco website of a screen where they're actually configuring the SSIDs. You know what? Let's have some fun here. On my browser, can I generate more than one SSID? So we're going to go to wireless on here. Yeah, guys, I don't have this memorized. You know, I just kind of go for it. So on this one, I can only create one SSID. But if I look over here, where'd it go? There's this thing called guest network. And the guest network allows me to turn on, this is how it actually creates extra SSIDs. So not only is it going to give me another SSID, but more importantly, it will have built-in firewalling that I can protect anybody who logs in as guest from getting to my local network. It probably, on this particular one, just sets it up so that they can get to the internet, but they can't see any shared folders or anything like that. Now, the next thing, once you get things a little bit bigger, as you get it into a more enterprisey environment, you run into what's known as an extended service set identifier, or an ESSID. Now, an ESSID counts on the fact that you're going to have multiple WAPs, and each one of these WAPs is going to be configured with an SSID that is exactly the same as all the others. If you do this, and if you then take these devices and plug them in to a single broadcast domain, you have created an ESSID. Remember when I was talking about the difference between SOHO and enterprise? Here's a great example. So I've got a big school, a campus, and I'm going to set up a big ESSID, you know, student network or something like that. And on this student network, I've got 237 WAPs that are all strung out all over the place. and they all have the same SSID. Cool, right? Well, what happens if I have to make a change? What if we have to create a teacher's SSID or something like that? In a SOHO environment with a SOHO attitude, you're going to log into each one of these devices individually, and then you're going to make these changes, which is crazy. In an enterprise environment, you invariably have some type of controller, some type of appliance, which then propagates, you have one interface, and it propagates these changes out to all the WAPs. This is one example of software-defined networking, where you use one single controller, and then you let all the other devices do the work based on what the controller tells them to do. So in an ESSID, all the devices, the moment you start plugging them, they even talk on the Ethernet side. So they talk to each other wirelessly, but they also talk through the Ethernet. And they do all kinds of amazing things. And probably the most important thing they do is that when a device moves from the range of one WAP to another, they automatically hand stuff off. And what's fascinating is there's almost no configuration to make that work. It just pretty much works out of the box. All right, let's go ahead and talk about 802.11 frames for a minute. This is an area that's so ignored, and it bothers me that it's ignored because it's absolutely fascinating. This is an example of something that's really cool that is not going to be on any CompTIA exam. It's still important and cool. So let's take a look at this. In particular, what I want you to look at is starting the far left. You'll see where it says frame control. That is a very, very important guy. An 802.11 frame has a maximum length of 2,304 bytes, which means it will fit a standard Ethernet frame within the frame body. That's very important. Okay. So that frame control on the far left, it defines what kind of frame you have. So you have three big kinds of frames in a wireless network. You have management frames. So a management frame is like when a device wants to associate with an SSID, or when it gets disassociated, or if you're going to be going through authentication or deauthentication processes. This is one, and there's a number of different management frames. Each one of those is its own kind of frame. There's probably about 15 more than that. Next are control frames. So when you're doing a request to send, or an allow to send, or an acknowledgement, these are just the quickie little frames that just handle that kind of stuff. And then the data, where it says frame body over there, the data itself, that's data. Then duration defines the longevity of the frame in microseconds. As you can imagine, if a frame's got problems, we want it to be able to just kill itself, and that's where we do all that. Next are the addresses. Now, if you look up in this frame, you'll see there are 4 address fields, okay? Here, I'll make it easy for you. Ignore address 4. If you're running ad hoc, that first address is the destination MAC, the second address is the source MAC, and the third address is the SSID. If you're sending from a client to a WAP, the first address is the SSID, the second address is the source MAC, and the third address is the destination MAC. And if you're a WAP talking to an individual device, the first address is the destination MAC, the second address is the SSID, and the third address is the source MAC. And address 4 is really only used in wireless bridges. And then I'm skipping a couple, but basically the frame body is the data itself, and then you have a frame control sequence, which is surprisingly similar to an Ethernet network. So 802.11 ain't Ethernet, folks. It's not. But the people who devised 802.11 knew that Ethernet was going to be around. I mean, they just invented WAPs to be a 802.11 to an Ethernet bridge. I wonder, did they ever make like a WAP that was like 802.11 a token ring or something like that? Don't laugh. I just got an email last week from somebody who heavily uses both 10base2 and token ring. And I was like, please take pictures. And like, we're high security, can't take pictures. Darn. That would have been cool, huh? So that's the frame. Okay, next thing I want to talk about is how do we move data. It's actually very simple, okay? So we take a device, it could be a WAP or it could be a client, and it puts a frame together, just like we saw. And the first thing it's going to do is it's going to look and go, is the channel idle? Do you hear any noise? All right. If the channel is idle, it will transmit a request to send to whoever he's trying to send it to. And then if it's not, he'll wait a random amount of back-off time in milliseconds and just keep trying again. Once he transmits his request to send, he's waiting for a clear to send to come back to him. If the clear to send is received, he goes ahead and transmit the frame. If it's not, waits random back-off time, checks ANA, resends the RTS, and just keeps going like that. Whoops. Okay, so that's the basics. Now the next thing I want to talk about is how do we move ones and zeros over a radio? Now we've definitely got some kind of packetized data, right? And I'm sorry, Ernie's distracting me with his Cicada 3301. Yeah, people think I'm paranoid. Okay, so there's a lot of pieces that come together to do this. First of all, you're going to have these channels, and then the channels will have certain widths. And we're going to get into this big time here in a little bit. Little chunks of frequency are set aside for your conversation to take place. Next is you're going to have some kind of modulation scheme. Modulation schemes is how the data gets talked to. In essence, how do the ones and zeros work? And it's easy for us when we start thinking about this stuff is that you got this WAP and then you got a client and it's just sitting there going beep, 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 you know, some kind of Morse code where dashes are 1 and dots are zeros or something like that. 802.11 devices are much more sophisticated than that. You got to keep in mind, we have to move phenomenal amounts of data. And we are actually limited by, of all things, the speed of light, which you think is really, really fast. But when you're moving gazillions of tons of data, it can be a problem. So if there's a way to move data faster through some kind of keying or something like that, well, we're going to do that. So this is the different types of modulations we run into. Binary phase shift keying, quadrature phase shift keying. We're going to look at both of these. There's a third one called complementary code keying, which is rare and weird. I'm not going to cover here. And then the one that everybody uses today is quadrature amplitude modulation, or QAM. So that's one part of it, is the modulation. But then on top of that, you're going to have some kind of multiplexing. So really what happens is that you may be given a channel, but the channel breaks down into subchannels, and then you send individual chunks of data. And there's two big ways to do it: direct sequence spread spectrum, and then orthogonal frequency division multiplexing, and we're about to look at both of those as well. Next is going to be spatial streams. Adding more transmits and receive radios. Instead of giving a WAP one transmit radio, give it 2 or 3 or 4 if it's a really late version of 802.11. And this is part of something that's known as MIMO. Now, the one thing I want to make sure you guys understand is that 802.11 isn't a radio broadcast. I mean, we're so used to as humans going, we want the funk, da, 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 da. Yeah. So that's not what's happening here. When you take a look at a communication between two 802.11 devices, it's almost easier to think in terms of what I call a standing wave. Now watch this carefully. So you can see the wave shifts, what we call its phase. And by shifting phases, it can tell the receiving system different important things. Now, with that attitude in mind, let's take a look at the 2.4 gigahertz ISM band. So this band runs from about 2400 megahertz to about 2500 megahertz. That's only 100 megahertz. This is a little tiny band. Now, what you have are these individual channels. Now, if you look very carefully, this channel runs from 2401 megahertz to 2423 megahertz, and the midpoint, the mid channel, is 2412 megahertz. So 2423 minus 2401 means that each channel is 22 megahertz wide. However, in reality, the bits at the beginning or end are called guards. So really, each channel is just 20 megahertz wide. Got that? So this is the first generation of 802.11. So what we had were, here in the United States, 11 channels. Now I want you to look at this channel really close. Do you see that? So this goes to 2443, and look at the next channel. That's 24. These overlap. In fact, all of these channels are overlapping really bad. This is a big deal. So if you're going to be picking a channel, usually don't want to pick a channel that has a potential of overlapping. So in the 802.11 world, if you're running at 2.4 gigahertz, there's really functionally only 3 channels. Channel 1, Channel 6, and Channel 11. Now if you are in Europe or in Japan, you get a couple more because it's high density there, right? And then if you're in Japan, just Japan, you get those channels as well. You get channel 14 as well. Make sure you know for 802.11 that it runs on the 2.4 gigahertz ISM band. Make sure you know that it has 11 channels in the US, up to 13 channels in Europe, and up to 14 channels in Japan. You will get tested on this stuff. Also, make sure that you're comfortable with the fact that in the 2.4 gigahertz band, all the channels are 20 megahertz wide. Okay? Got that? Good. Now, in the 2.4 gigahertz channel, if you have more advanced versions of 802.11, you can do something called channel bonding. So in essence, what we can do is we can take two 20 megahertz channels and combine it into a single 40 megahertz channel. Hey, if you put more lanes on the freeway, you're going to be able to move more cars, right? Absolutely. It doubles the bandwidth, but it eats up a ton of the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum. In fact, it eats up about 2/3 of it. To get 2 of the channels that aren't overlapping, you're probably going to use 1 and 6, and that means if anybody else is close by, they're going to have trouble talking. So let's go ahead and show them how to do that. Okay, I'll show you. So we take a look over here on my fellow right here. First of all, I want you to notice that we are on the 2.4 gigahertz. Can you guys, I hope you guys can see all this. Your 2.4 gigahertz band. The channel bandwidth, right now it's set to either 20 or 40. If I wanted to, I could force it to do only 20, or I could force it to do 40. But if I leave it at 20 to 40, I'm basically telling the system to use 40 if it thinks it can use it. So I can pick my control channel, and then I can also pick an extension channel. Oh, wait a minute. The current control channel is 2. Here we go. And I'm going to force this to 40, go this to 1, and it goes to above anyway. Oh, I have to reboot, and I don't want to reboot. So basically, it's going to be forced into auto mode. I go ahead and I set this up. I'll reboot, and then it's going to give me some other options in here. So let me leave that as auto. Cool. All right. Man, I knew this presentation was going to take a while. Now, so channel bonding requires all this crazy configuration stuff, but the 5 gigahertz band does it in a much more elegant way. So let's take a look at the 5 gigahertz ISM band. Now, this is as it's done in the USA. There are variations internationally. So you really have 3 big chunks to the ISM band. Some people call them the low, middle, and high. So when you talk about these channels, notice it doesn't say channel 1, 2, or 3. Now we're using these numbers. And you get pretty good at recognizing instantly that these are going to be 20 megahertz channels. Now what's interesting, if you want to do channel bonding in 802.11 at 5 gigahertz, you don't try to bond 2 channels. All you do is you pick channels that are pre-bonded. So like if you want to do 40 megahertz and you choose channel 102, don't bother trying to use channels 100 and 104 anywhere near them, because this guy's going to be eating up that bandwidth. Equally, you can go up to 80 megahertz on much more advanced versions of 802.11. And on the newest versions, 802.11ax, and actually you can do it on AC as well. There's even a 160 megahertz wide channel. So if you want to do channel bonding in 5 gigahertz, well, first of all, you usually just set these to auto and don't touch them because they do such a good job. But if you want to do channel bonding, you pick certain channel numbers. There's only 2 channels that are 160 megahertz wide. In reality, doing really wide, well, just like I was telling you with the 2.4, to try to do 40 megahertz wide channels just ends up eating a lot of bandwidth. We have the same problem in the 5 gigahertz, is that if you try doing 160 megahertz channels, you end up eating so much bandwidth that, well, none of your neighbors like you, and they'll be making so much interference that it often makes it not worth it. For example, at Total Seminars, we have a very advanced, in my opinion, late generation 802.11 AC network. And we run at 40. I think we tried running at 80 for a while, and that caused issues. We backed it off to 40, and that's our best bandwidth. So don't go instantly thinking. Remember, the bigger the bandwidth, the more lanes, but the more chances of interference, okay? Show him, Mike. All right, I'll show him. So on the 5 gigahertz, it's going to look pretty similar. First of all, and keep in mind that we're looking at a very high-end Soho 802.11ax router here. So the channel bandwidths, by doing this, we're allowed him to make a choice. I can enable 160 if I want to, or I can force it to an individual number. Again, I'm probably not even going to bother, unless I was in a really, really quiet area, if I was like at Elaine Bachelor's barn there in Massachusetts, nice quiet area, maybe I'd try it, but in reality, here even with 802.11ax, the most advanced standard, they want you to, they force you to go ahead and do that. All right. So we're going to set the channel bonding is going to be automatic, and I'm going to leave it as automatic. But I do want to show you one other thing. First of all, look at the current control channel. It says 157. Do you see that? .157 is way down here. So what you have are certain channels that are known to be a little bit risky with radars, like Doppler radars and stuff. And what they have are known as DFS channels. Basically, what you're saying is that every wireless access point certainly in the United States, is designed to automatically move away from channels that overlap with radar. If I put a wireless access point near an airport, and there's a Doppler radar there, it will move off of those, what are known as DFS. I don't remember what DFS stands for. It moves off of those channels. So that's why it's rarely a good idea, especially if you're near an airport, to try to manually configure 5 gigahertz channels, because it's got a lot going on. Your WAP is smart and can sense conflicts and interference, and it will back off on its own and pick clearer channels than you can. How's that for cool? The enterprise environment can be a little bit different. Man, we are quickly running out of time. Let's just march through. Showed them already. You know what? I'm going to stop right here. I think this is a good place to stop. When we get back tomorrow, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start talking about 802.11 modulation. And here's where we're going to get into quadrature, key. I can never remember the names of them. I have to look at them, or QAM and all of these different things. These things are amazing because they basically, instead of, for example, in one click of the phase, one change of the phase, instead of being 1 bit, how about if you had 256 bits? Wouldn't that make your data move a lot faster? It would. And so that's what we're going to get into tomorrow. So I'll tell you what, the other thing I'm going to do for tomorrow, thank you, Alan. Distribution file system, DFS. Thank you, sir. Audrey left? Oh. Crypt Keeper. Myers, you are hitting the G spot in my brain. Isn't this stuff fun? It's because it's cool, man. I love doing this stuff. I hope I'm going into a little bit more depth than we need to for passing CompTIA stuff, but I hope you guys are enjoying this. Let's just pick this up tomorrow. And Dynamic frequency selection. Thank you, Audrey. You are right. Oh, Allison was here. Sorry I missed you, Allison. Anyway, guys, when we get back, we're going to pick right back up. We're going to be doing modulation and getting into that. And we'll be looking more and more deeper into our systems. So until then, I'm going to bug out. It is 3 o'clock. Folks, I'm out the door. So until I see you again, this is your Uncle Mike saying good night. Good night.